Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're here on YouTube and you want to listen to the actual show, you can just click on the little link down below. If you're here as an attendee and you are looking at all of us talking about these questions and answering questions and talking about whatever we're talking about here and think that you can contribute, think that you have something to add to what we're doing, you probably do. We'd love to see you here. You just have to be here by 6:40 Pacific Standard. We do the mic checks at that point, and once we do that, we close the panel. We open up at 6 o'clock is when we just start talking. Today we were talking about surround music. I think that became kind of the topic, and amongst other things. So we have a lot of interesting conversations before 7 o'clock, but you don't have to be here to be on the panel until 6:40. 6:40, we also distribute the Discord link. That's where you can jump in and hang out with 800 of us that are still talking between all these shows. Then at 7 o'clock, we have the general discussion. So general discussion is when we're talking about whatever questions you have here. You have to ask the questions probably more than any other place that you find. You're the producers. So if you're watching this show anywhere, when you ask the questions, when you vote on the questions, that drives the conversation. So it's all up to you to kind of drive it. And right now, just as a warning, we don't have a lot of questions, so we're gonna talk a lot about the ones that we have. So if you like that, then leave it there. But if you have any other questions, this might be a good day to throw them in there. We on the second hour, we have especially something vertical that we want to talk about. Mondays are kind of wild cards. Tuesdays are audio. Wednesdays are camera. Thursdays are special guests. Today, in the second hour, we're going to have the creator, producer, and creator of the Comedy Central Daily Show, Madeleine Smithberg. So we're pretty excited about that. So we'll be able to ask questions about how that show got built and how she approaches these kinds of projects. So it should be interesting. And then tomorrow we'll talk about kind of how to get work. Not so much how to get work as a producer, but as an individual. You want to work on a team. How do you get into that? How do you crack into the business in that area? So we'll talk about that tomorrow. And then education on Saturday and Sunday. We have just 2 hours of more talking. So that's what we do. We talk. Anyway, if you're interested in sharing this with other people, you want to go ahead and use this link. Don't use your own link. They'll come in as you. And that's not the way we intended. So anyway, without further ado, Bill, we got some questions stacking up?
We do. Only a few though, so yeah. I encourage people to ask questions. But
anyway, before we get to the questions, let's talk a little bit about. We promised everybody that since we're in Zoom and we talk about Zoom a lot, that we would talk about any of the new features. Just as a quick coverage, what were the big announcements from yesterday? Go ahead, John.
I posted some on Discord. So breakout rooms and webinars was a biggie. The ability to see people in the waiting room is a huge move forward.
So you're able to see other people in the waiting room? Is that the...
No, when somebody's in the waiting room, you get a live video window of them so you can see who it is.
Right.
That's a huge feature. And then customizable, correct me if I'm wrong, John, green rooms or waiting rooms or something that you had the ability to manage those rooms. Those were some of the biggies, but I heard tangentially that most of those won't be available till first quarter next year. Is that correct, John?
I can't tell you anything in terms of when availability is, but the customization gives much greater customization at the various steps that a person enters your meeting or webinar, which was one that a lot of people wanted because they really are style and brand conscious, so you can make sure it's at every point you touch the client.
That's been a big thing for us. I was just building a webinar last night, and the clients, building that page, and you're just kind of uploading, well, here's your banner, here's your logo, and it just kind of goes where it goes, and there's no way to change the color in the background. And, there's a lot of questions of like, why can't we do something better? And well, that's what this thing does. So that's going to be great. Also, more API. It looks like more API hooks within the app. So most of the API stuff has been outside of the app. So, I'm interested in that. I'm kind of thinking about things that we could put. Now that we have, I'm going to be interested in researching those hooks to see what we can actually grab to. And no, thanks, Guy. And Jeffrey, go ahead.
So on their islands, they had something called a broadcast booth where they were talking about how you can actually use Zoom for broadcasting. So they're definitely putting some thought into it. But I think it's more of a studio. If you bring somebody in, you have a one-on-one conversation, then it can be sent out to Zoom. The other thing is, they were talking on the API, the zaps, and the abilities to do things like lower thirds and things like that. That's gonna be really cool once it comes out.
Oh, that's cool. So I didn't see the lower third announcement. So you're going to be able to have your own lower thirds.
It was during the keynote that they talked about that with the reactions and everything.
That's great. That's great. Hosmer?
Yeah, the other thing was the onzoom.com. So I see it's still in beta and only for US, but that's an interesting development in terms of having a payment gateway hooked up to that platform.
And so this was basically so that people can do one-offs. They don't have to sign up for a monthly subscription or a 2-month subscription or a yearly subscription. They just do, I want to do an event using this platform. I think that'll be useful.
I tried to use that on Zoom this morning, and you have to have a Zoom account to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So either a free account or a paid for account.
Good, John.
I think John will.
Go ahead.
I can say the one, was it the one at 1 o'clock about how to do a good Zoom virtual meeting? Somebody's been watching office hours a very, very significant amount of time.
Go ahead, John Edelson.
Yeah, on Zoom is very interesting, and the state parks are part of that. And so I would encourage anyone who would like to know more about the California State Parks to go to On Zoom and type in California State Parks. Interesting story. Oops, we're on YouTube. Okay, this is okay. The state parks provide everything for free. They got engaged in this as Zoom was thinking about this, both the state parks and the national parks. And the state parks electronic field trips being free, they've always been somewhat tech challenged for budgets, because do you spend money on hardware, or do you spend money on refurbishing some part of the park? But the parks do charge for campgrounds and some events and some things that they do. And the On Zoom is probably going to let them charge for some events that will put more money into the ports projects for students. I could tell you the director of the parks and the director of the ports project is real excited about the On Zoom and the amount of energy that Zoom's putting into it to make an easy way for people to do from free to paid and get events out.
That's great.
And Hospice, you're right. It's a one-time thing. You could do it. You don't have. You could test your feet with it, but there's really no reason to upgrade to some other system. And the musicians should enjoy this because it will have all the same features of the high-quality audio.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I think that the one thing we are noticing with the high-quality audio and video is you really have to be, with our room connections, for instance, you really have to make sure the person on the other end is not on Wi-Fi and has a really good connection, because Zoom isn't very forgiving, if they're on that. So with great power comes great responsibility. But I do think that we're going to see more concerts and more interactions because of those things. I still think Zoom is. I think it's amazing that Google's so far behind, but I think Google's still second place. But can't see them from where Zoom is at the moment, especially with the new features. So anyway, it's exciting.
So Alex, a question for you: would you think of putting your question and answers tool as a Zap?
Yes, I'm definitely thinking of that. so I just, that's when I say I'm going to be researching it, I'm highly interested in that process. So yeah, we're just going to research what it takes to. We're doing a lot of infrastructure right now for something else for the next couple of weeks, and then we'll turn our attention to that. But we want to get it in as fast as we can. Go ahead, John.
So, Guy, would you think about doing a sound meters app sponsored by DVE?
I'd love to. That sounds really cool. I mean I'm still trying to learn this voice meter potato and all these other hooks and everything to make it work.
Well,
but yeah,
you say potato, I say potato, but that would be a really cool.
Well,
app.
there's some depending on how deep the API goes. We took a lot of advantage of Google's API for switching, so really all the way down to really being able to control how the switching happens, and we went way beyond any editing system as far as how it goes through. So imagine being able to mix the auto switching with a human, so the human has some control in the audio, and the auto switch has other parts of the control, and so if we have that access in the API, we already know what we want to do. John?
I don't know if you saw in the keynote and later in the SDK section, but a company called Cinemaker had their program highlighted, which is basically a 4-camera switcher.
Yeah, I think actually, yeah, someone I know is connected to that. So anyway, yeah, so it's yeah, so I think I think that the app, the ability, the API is going to be exciting. I think that we'll see a lot of growth in that area, and I think Google had it and then they let it go. And they tore it all out, and it was just really annoying. Go ahead, John Preto.
A couple of observations during the keynote. Cover your ears, Mr. Idelson. During the keynote, I was getting, I don't know if she was French or German on speaker view. When she was speaking, it was feeding back into program, and then her name was coming up on the screen. I don't know if anybody caught that. That was interesting.
I think, John, you're just hearing voices. It comes with age. It's that Las Vegas water.
I must say the production's much better than it was before. So they've come leaps and bounds. I'm not crazy about the flamingos dancing around in Jell-O and the flying whales. I must have needed a stronger drink. But other than that, I thought the production was good. And the other interesting thing I noticed was the tearing. It was like they digitized interlaced video frames or something. I've seen tons of tearing.
No,
yeah. Go ahead, Alex.
It looked like an interlaced camera being compressed.
Yeah. So one of the challenges with the whale that you need to understand, the first Zoomtopia was sort of a jungle. The second Zoomtopia was underwater. That's when the parks did their dive at Lake Tahoe. So they had a big whale in the Zoomtopia. So if you didn't go to the second Zoomtopia, you don't understand it, because the third Zoomtopia, which was outer space, everyone loved the whale so much, they brought the whale to the conference again. So the whale is now sort of the mascot of Zoomtopia. And that's why you were seeing the whale swim.
They put more zoo in Zoom.
Yeah, but I think that there was that's the they just need to put a deinterlacer before the compressor. Before it goes into Zoom. It just looked like they took a, what I was guessing is the production team was using a broadcast camera, standard broadcast camera that I'm sure looked really big and pretty, and just pumped 1080i into it, and then Zoom just pushed that in, because when it gets compressed, it looks much worse. So it's
watch the Zoomtopia today and some other things, and you'll be able to see some of that stuff.
Okay, cool. Stuart?
I was just hearing about the whale, and I was wondering if there was going to be a bowl of petunias.
Nice.
We now know who's Red Hitchhiker's got.
Yeah. All right, next question.
Well, it's right along this lines. Vincent Alvarez in Bellingham, Washington. My boss wants me to get Zoom to display 8 to 10 people in a circle versus the grid, trying to create a talking circle for counseling. He mentioned using a plug-in, quote unquote, or hiring a developer. I'm thinking not possible or very expensive.
The cheapest way to do that would be cheaper than developing it, would be to do it in hardware. Just do a, you could definitely do this in a variety of switching or other hardware where you do point-to-point connections and you build it yourself, and that's what you do. But as far as doing it as a development, I don't even think that Zoom will let you get out of the grid. So I don't know if that would work. Go ahead, Stuart.
Limit the number of people who are in the grid to, say, 9. Put your boss in the middle and redraw where the grid layout is for how he wants people around him. Just click and drag. Yeah. So it's on his screen, it's in a circle of people around him.
I think he probably wants everyone to see it the same way, and I think that would be the more challenging part. John Preto, and then Bill, and then we'll move on.
I would do it in Unreal Engine. So I would feed in the grid into Unreal, and then from there I could do any layout you want.
Yep, that's a good one. Now, Bill.
Yeah, the thing for me though is if he's trying to recreate a talking circle, that's people looking at each other across, with engagement across a central circle in a conference room type of thing. I'm not sure that's easy to virtualize on a flat pane.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a little skeuomorphic. Go ahead, Jeffrey, real quick. We're gonna move on.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Even though the presenter is going in the circle, you'd be seeing the grid and you'd be seeing this guy doing this, and it wouldn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. Next question.
Gavin Roberts in London. Well, that's the takeaways from Zoomtopia.
Yeah,
we covered that.
we
Yeah.
covered
So
that.
Chris Fenwick now from the panel in Sacramento. Alex, do your clients come to you because they want the best audio and video quality, or do you find you're trying to push them to a production value they don't feel they really need?
Most of my clients.
Test.
Well, Sky, we're definitely
Guy,
hearing you.
you're not muted.
Yeah. Most of my clients come partially because we produce a really high quality event. So I think that is part of what we get, or a lot of what I get asked to do are things that are difficult. I would love to say that I persuade clients to do the highest quality video, but usually they come and I'm asked to do things that are hard, and so usually they require odd pipelines, whether it's 360 or crazy connections or lots of stuff. I just don't get. I'm usually, probably because I charge a lot, I don't get asked to do much bread and butter work. So it usually, or the events that I work on tend to be complicated. So anyway, that's just what I've specialized in. So I think that my current clients definitely expect the best video and audio capable of that the pipeline's capable of. I think that where we, as a team, my team does well is we try to think about things way past what the client's doing. Not so much changing it, but how do we find the best designers? How do we do little changes to the design so that it all looks cleaner? So someone might send us something that doesn't quite have the right white space or doesn't have quite the right whatever, or if we just added a little bit of this, and then we of course get it approved, but we just do a lot of little refinements to make it a great event. My goal is always the value is to be the value add. So it's not just that we're doing what the client asked for, we're doing what they asked for and then trying to find ways that we can subtly, make it better, but without changing it so much that it requires approvals. So if you work in a lot of large corporations, you think of approval rounds of approval, and so there are things that you go, well, that'd be really great, but then that would be another week of discussion, and so you kind of pick your battles, and if you can do subtle things to just make everything sound just a little bit better, look a little bit better, works well. So I don't think anybody else has anything to say about that, but it's the I think that's what I just always want to compete where it's hard, not where it's commoditized. So I tend to be looking for those kinds of jobs as well. So next question.
Victor from the panel says, if I don't own an ATMOS system, how could I possibly practice mixing in ATMOS? Do I have to buy speakers or can I use my AirPod Pros to do it?
You'll hear a little in your AirPod Pros, but the minimum is you need some kind of sound bar to at least start to hear what's going on. So a sound bar will get you part of the way there, as far as hearing it, but eventually if you're going to do real Atmos mixing, you'll need discrete channels, so that's the, so that, you will need, eventually you'll need discrete speakers to do it, to hear what's actually going on. But you can definitely get started, with, a bar or whatever, just to start hearing what it sounds like. Cause that's what a lot of people are going to hear it as. It's not bad to hear it through that. Courtney and then Jeff.
How many discrete speakers is a 23? I think was the original. 10. Oh, just 10. Well, that's doable. Yeah.
10 is kind of a the basic 514. Of course, if you go 714, then you need 12. So but then you can keep adding.
So Jeff? It's matrixed, even though it's multiple channels to start in the mixing stage, but it's matrixed down to 10 channels.
Well, it's in a pure sense, Atmos will come out as Atmos, and so the sounds exist in an object space. They don't exist in speakers, so that's not being mixed down to channels. It lives in that, and the receiver gets it as that. And so then the receiver decides how many, or group of receivers, or however you set it up, will decide, if you have 50 speakers, where does that object sit in 3D space based on how many speakers you have access to. So it's not limited to, I'm just going out to 10 or 12. It's just that's how many you need to start to build the sphere that you're working inside of. And then you have to place it, where it makes sense.
And it positions it based on frequency modeling of the human head, I guess. Yeah.
There's a lot of things that it's based on. Figuring out where you should be sitting. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I believe the Atmos delivery is 128 channels, which is a 9.1 bed, and those are static position. Of course, you can mix into those. And then 118 possible objects that contain metadata of their position, and the playback system places those objects and that bed into whatever speaker system you have. Dolby's recommendation for mixing suites at a minimum is a 7.1.4. So that's 3 across the front, 2 on the sides, 2 in the rear, a sub, and 4 ceiling channels. Got to spend some money, Victor.
It's only
this one's not going to happen. My wife can barely stand the stereo speakers I use to mix music, and she's like, "It's so loud, stop it!" So
I've already decided that by the end of the year, this little cove that I'm in right now, I've already decided I got 12 speakers going in. Like I've just decided I have to figure this out. I want to have to watch movies, as well as I'm going to get a 80 some inch vision display, and I just have to, that's going to be my office, because I just, I'm totally addicted at this point.
Invest in a boatload of JBL 305s early.
Yeah, exactly. Jeff, you were going to say?
Yeah, right before pandemic hit, I was shopping for ceiling speakers to expand the studio, because we've got 5.1 Genelec in there. So looking for 4 ceiling channels and another pair to add it out to 7.1.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, no, I think it's, I've had the opportunity to listen to a couple of these mixes in a big space, 80 speakers, and it's I was just like, okay, I have to keep going down this path. Anyway, next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, and the panel says, is anyone doing a Zoomtopia watch party like we did for the Apple event? That was fun.
It's too much. There's too many of them. If it was a 45-minute thing where they gave all the announcements, we would absolutely do it. And I think that, like if it's that there's all these little announcements sprinkled over everything rather than just one big keynote. Go ahead, John.
The closing session would be fun for a group if somebody wanted to do that. It's going to be entertaining.
What time is it?
I have to look at the schedule.
Sometime today. I probably can't do it during the day, but I would recommend somebody do it. Maybe
like it's 2 and something like 2:45 to 3:15. If somebody's got it handy, I don't have it in front of me.
I have a test there then. But I would recommend doing. We will do more of those. The Apple one is the one that I think most of us were interested in, so we jumped on it. But I think that doing more of those would be a lot of fun. So we'll keep working on that. Now, next question.
Jeff Francis from the panel in Columbia, South Carolina says, ATEM Macros. I can create 2 macros, one to mute XLR inputs, another to unmute XLR inputs. Is it possible to create a single macro to toggle mute on and off?
I don't know.
It would have to be able to read the status somehow, and I don't.
Well, I just don't know if there's a command that says toggle. Like that's the question is there a ATEM command that says toggle? If it doesn't, here's what you could do is you could write something that said, if it's on, turn it off. You could query it and say, are you on or are you off? And then just do the other one. So the script, it would be it wouldn't be a macro though. It'd be a script at that point. Because you're asked, but a could definitely do it, where it goes out and asks what state are you in right now? Go to the other state, or not go to the other state, but have some thought process in there. But I don't think you could do it in a macro. I think the macro has to tell it. I don't think the macro knows what the state is. I think the macro knows where it's supposed to go.
You have to write it in the API, yeah.
Yeah, in the API, you could write a script, a relatively simple script. I think that would do that. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
The only other workaround I can think of is if you have a Stream Deck, you can do the AB switch in Stream Deck to turn the macro on and then turn the macro off. That's pretty much it that I can think of.
Yeah. But I think otherwise you're now talking about just a couple lines of code. Query the switcher and then make a decision. Next question.
Tony Mobley from the panel here says, how do you spotlight in Zoom?
There is the ellipsis in the top corner of everybody's window. When you click on that, if you're a host or co-host, you would see a thing that says Spotlight. You don't see it for yours because you're not a co-host. But if you're a co-host or a host, can then hit Spotlight for all, and you can add up to 9 to the Spotlight. And you just have to remember that anybody with an older version of Zoom will not be able to will not see what you're doing. So I think that's becoming less and less of an issue now that we're moving forward, where more and more people have the newest version of Zoom. But you have to remember that if you're doing that spotlighting for everyone and adding, the first spotlight goes out to everyone, but as you add more, just know that not everybody's going to see that are watching your webinar, because if they're on an older version. Also know that I don't think it shows up. I think only the first one, or it's always full screen, I think, in the web. The web access is very limited. Like it's not worth it to do it outside the app. Next question.
And by the way, I think I was 40 years old before I learned that ellipsis is the formal name for the ...
Oh.
Anyway, Kevin Roberts.
I'll be honest with you. I think I was like 48. I think it was like 2 years ago that I knew what ellipsis was instead of ... Someone said, I don't think you should use ellipses so often. And I was like, and I was thinking like parentheses. I don't understand. Like, I don't remember that.
It's like tech jargon. Once you know it, you know it. But if you don't know it, if you haven't run across it, it's like, what? Anyway. Gavin Roberts of London says, Alex, you may have already talked about this, but have you looked at ShowFlo TV? It's like StreamYard on speed, a lot of functionality. Any thoughts?
I haven't. I've seen it go by. Has anyone used ShowFlo? I haven't. I just haven't used it for anything. I think that part of it is my pipeline is pretty well oiled at this point, and so I just haven't. And I've been so busy over the last 6 months. I mean, ever since COVID, I haven't had day off. so I haven't looked at a lot of these things. But it does look like an interesting one. It does look like it's very similar to StreamYard, but I know ShowFlo itself is a thing that you manage events with. So it's kind of interesting that they took that on, but I don't think anyone else is raising their hands. So we'll just keep moving. Haven't tested it yet.
James Babbitt here in San Diego says, some reviewers have reported that the new Sony A7S overheats while recording video. Which camera would you choose instead of an A7S? Maybe a camcorder? A7S3, by the way.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Use an A7S3 with an external recorder. Sony have always had a reputation, perhaps undeserved, with the NEX series for overheating. The alpha cameras definitely did overheat.
And I just finished shooting a ton of stuff with my 6K, and I just have to say it's the best camera. It's my favorite camera I've ever played with. Is my Blackmagic 6K. It is the easiest one to use. The footage I'm shooting in log, and then doing some pretty high quality conversions, and it looks stunning. It's a really good camera. Does it do the low light as well as the A7S? Probably not. But I gotta say, as a general purpose video camera, at $2,000, it's about as good as it gets. The interface is amazing. The amount of control you have is good. The images are great. Again, the only thing I'd worry about is low light is probably not as good as the A7S. But otherwise, if you're saying camcorder, that'd be the one that I would probably lean towards. Guy, you were just showing that. Was that the 6K or the 4K?
Yeah, I've got the 6K. I swapped out momentarily, so right now I'm using a Panasonic G100 just to kind of see what the image looked like. But yeah, here's a 6K with the Sigma 18-35 1.8 lens. It's a nice package. I mean, for $2,000 for the body. I mean, when we got into the 5D originally, those were more than that. So I mean, to get 6K for the money that we were spending on HD a few years ago, it's crazy.
It's very competitive. I just shot with it. Now I have to admit, I put an Angenieux lens on it on the front of it, but I just shot a whole bunch of stuff with it, and it's super sharp. Go ahead, Stuart.
Did that freeze while I was talking? Because I was halfway through an answer, and it's like everybody in the grid was like frozen.
Oh, interesting.
So the point was that use the A7S3 with an external recorder.
Oh, we saw that.
That way you'll avoid a lot of the heat. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah. But if you haven't bought it yet,
everything went solid.
Yeah. If you haven't bought it yet, I would definitely look at the Blackmagic one as well, because it's less expensive and more of a video camera than the. If you're really looking for it, I will say that while the Blackmagic camera takes still photos, I would never use it as a still camera. It's just weird. The whole thing is weird.
Is the person asking the question only doing HD? If so, Sony, they're a bit old, but the VG30 and VG900 are a really nice camcorder with the same basic sensors.
If you
but better
really
audio
want
inputs.
at $5,000, if you really want low light, there's the Canon ME200, which goes to an ISO of 1,000,000, and it's nifty. Anyway, but it's only 1080p. Next question.
And good. The question queue is filling back up because I was going to say that if you hadn't asked something, it was a good time. But Victor is back into the question queue with, could you explain AES 50 protocol and how it's best used? Is it like Dante?
Go ahead, Jeff.
It is only like Dante that it uses Cat5 wire. It does not use typical network protocols. So Dante actually runs over the top of standard layer 3 networking protocols. To get up into that in AES, you have to go to AES 67, I believe, which is an audio over IP. So AES 50 uses Ethernet wiring or Cat5 wiring to get, but it's proprietary standard. I think it's kind of end of life or vintage, if we use the Apple parlance.
Vintage. I was like, I haven't heard of AES 50 for a long time. Victor?
So if you use Dante, then you can basically use that to interface with any computer in your network and send audio to it or from it?
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry, say that question again.
He said you can go ahead, Victor.
Okay, so let's say I have two Macs and I want to send stuff from an X32 board to mix and to record. I can send it to either one of my Macs if I get a Dante card for that X32.
Yes, you would need to purchase a Dante virtual sound card license for each Mac. That's $30, and that gets you a 64-channel in, 64-channel out Dante interface through your Ethernet port. The CalDigit hub you have works well. If not, use an actual Apple Thunderbolt to Ethernet adapter for the Dante, and that gets you 64 channels. And then you in Dante controller can assign at will where you want channels to go.
So you can send it to either one or both.
Either one, both, however you want.
Wow.
And Dante does nothing to the audio. It is only routing. And once you set up the routing, that is stored in the Dante devices. You don't need the controller on to have that routing happen. The devices remember that when you plug them in the next time, all the routing that was there is still there.
No wonder those cards are impossible to get right now.
Dante is beautiful.
Yeah.
Just stay away from Dante Via.
Yeah.
And you do need one actual hardware Dante device in addition to computers.
Because it needs the chip. It needs the chip to.
So that X32 card, if I buy that for $600, that's all I need, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
That two licenses. Okay, thank you, guys.
Go ahead, Preto.
You just answered my question. I've had an X32 rack sitting right here, Victor.
Mm-hmm.
This is my travel kit, and I didn't know it didn't come with the Dante card, which is $595 or whatever it was extra.
Once you put it in, it's magical. All of the Zoom stations that we have, they're all Dante. So they all have Dante virtual card, and that's how they get all their audio. And we're doing really complex, we're sending all those out. Then it's going into a CL5, and that's all Dante. Then that's interfacing with the ClearCom stuff that we have. That's all Dante. Then we're using Dante to bring it back into all those computers as a return. So it's amazing. Go ahead, Jeff, and then Victor.
I don't know about the Behringer cards, but the Yamaha Dante cards come with a Dante virtual sound card license code with them. So you may actually only need to purchase one for your second computer.
Yep.
I will investigate that. And also, once I put that in place, and if I use the VPN solution, Alex, you spoke about the other day, then Jeff could mix for me if I wanted him to.
Yeah. I mean, so just the one thing that Dante starts to get, you should be really careful of your network. So if I was going to do that, I would start thinking about having a network that your Dante is on and a network that is the VPN. But starting to do complex things with your network over Dante it doesn't like latency. It has clocking it. It's trying to do a lot. And so you just want to be careful of how you do that network. I'd probably do a dual network in that sense, where I'd have one network that's connected to Jeff through VPN or whatever, and another network that is managing Dante. And I'd be really careful about that.
Truly another network or just two VLANs?
I would do it as well. You could do VLANs. I would do it Personally, when we do them, they're their own network. They're not even a VLAN. They're like their own boxes that go along generally, just so that we don't. I think in the current one we do it have a VLAN, but we have a Meraki and we have a lot of control over the router. So, but just be careful. Like it really has to be a true VLAN, and you really have to isolate those things out because it's Dante does not like the network to change very much. Even the eco settings in your router will screw it up. Courtney and then Jeff.
Alex, do you use Dante to do your mix minus routing, or do you do that in the X32 or?
It's done. No, it's done in the CL5.
CL5.
Well, yep, CL5. Yep.
But could you use Dante as just a separate aux channel?
Technically, yeah. We're just doing a lot more to it. We've got you technically should be able to do a mix minus inside of Dante to do that. The main thing is that because you're sending it. No, you couldn't. Okay, go ahead, Jeff. Jeff's going to disagree with me.
Yeah, because Dante is only routing. It will not do any mixing or processing. It will not change bits whatsoever. It just is a transmission from one place to another.
But I think that if you had like 3 computers talking to each other, you could just send the other 2 computers back. Oh no, yeah, you're right. It's not mixing though.
Right. It won't do any mixing.
Need something that would mix those 2 together. It would do mix minus.
Combine all combine the return.
You'd have to combine it somewhere.
Yeah.
Yep. And we're combining with a lot of things because we have comms and, talkback and all kinds of other things that are getting combined in the pipeline before it gets sent back to the person listening.
But you create a separate aux channel for each independent person that you're sending stuff back to on Dante.
So a different bus. Yeah.
A different bus. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Doug?
Yeah, I agree with you that the way we run our comms and our audio is that it's 2 separate networks. So I literally have Unify as our main network, and then Cisco router or Cisco switches as the Dante network. And the crazy thing, and if you ask Jeff Keithley, he'll cringe at it, that I don't even have a router on that network handing out IP addresses. I spent over an hour with a Yamaha tech because I had some problems. And he's like, listen, he goes, take the router out. He goes, let the thing self-assign. And he said, I'll never forget it. He goes, my goal is that you never, ever call me again. And so I'm like, you know what? Like, I like that comment. So I will try it and I will report back. And I haven't had to call him. So
you didn't report back. You never reported back because it didn't need to.
The thing is, you'll see your devices in Dante controller, so that's how you see if your devices are on. But I never touch that switch as far as managing it. I mean, it can be, but I don't have to.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I would agree with Doug there. For Dante, there's 2 ways to be about the network, and that's dumb or really, really smart. And I prefer dumb. Plug the thing in, let the devices, if there's no DHCP server, which there isn't, if you just plug all your Dante devices into a simple dumb switch, there's no DHCP server handing out addresses. So all of them fall back to 169.254 fallback addresses, and everything falls there, and they all talk to each other. So Victor, you don't have to spend a lot of money for a switch. Get a basic Cisco switch. I would recommend, if you're getting into the Dante world, be sure you get a PoE switch because like these little devices, little Audinate AVIO. So this is a Dante to 2XLR. So you can just drop it in and bring in 2 line level devices. There's great little headphone amps you can get. So if you want to put yourself a little overdub station in another room, you can just run a Cat5 cable, have 2 mics and headphone feed there. And those will run off of PoE. So you don't even need to plug them in. So if you're going to invest in a switch, be sure you get one with PoE is what I'm saying.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, if I'm talking about just my local network right here, not going out anywhere except for my 2 Macs, do I still need a VLAN? I mean, I know I need a switch and I've got that, but do I still need to worry about VLANs and stuff?
Well, it sounds like you just put it on your own. You can put them on their own switch with the mixer and then they would.
That's what I'm asking. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Let us know how it works.
Yes. I think locally in your house, you could just get started plugging them into your home network.
Perfect. I mean, that's exactly what
that's a great place to start.
I'll let you know once I find one of these cards that I can actually buy, and and the mixer's coming in next week or something.
Great. Next question.
Hey, Mitchell's in Washington has one for John Idelson. Can you please discuss the captioning, transcription, and translation features of Zoom? You've mentioned them before, but he's curious about more specifics and how these are being set up for Zoomtopia.
I really don't have a lot of information I could give other than what's on the website, but there is a very robust both transcription and translation. Alex, you probably could talk to it better because you've used it more recently.
Yeah, so you can identify for interpreters, for voice interpreters, you can identify people as interpreters within Zoom, and then they're talking into it, and people can choose to listen to them, which is really cool. So that it's actually better than most streams to have it that way. And I believe that Zoom, I haven't done it myself, but for a while Zoom was limited to only a handful of identifiers as far as the names of the different countries or languages, and they've opened that up a fair bit. We had a partner that needed a lot more languages in Asia, and so anyway, so I think that got solved. And then the captioning, the way the captioning works is that you can identify somebody as a captioner. So if you have it set up for captioning, you identify someone as a captioner, and then there's two different ways to do it. One is they can type in and somehow just feed it right into Zoom. The other way is to use an API token, and that API token is then given to the captioner and they type it in. Now, when you use the API token, it goes to a third-party service, which then goes to Zoom. The problem with the API token is that it adds about 3 seconds of delay in our experience. So it's a slower experience, and we find that the formatting isn't great. So the API token doesn't format as well as the, so what you really want are captioners that are able to tie directly into Zoom when they're identified and handed that piece. And I'm still researching. Most captioners we work with want the API token because Zoom has another problem, which hopefully they'll fix, which is that the box can get overloaded. And so what happens is that if you get someone who knows how to caption to Zoom, they'll clear the box between every entry. Every sentence they'll just clear the box, and they do it. If someone doesn't know that, it gets all stacked. It won't run correctly. So there's a little bit of a who knows how to so the captioners that know how to caption to Zoom, it looks gorgeous. Like when it's working with that direct connection with a captioner that's good at it, it looks like TV. But there's a whole bunch of things that we found because we're doing a couple of them a week that you end up with different captioners and different things and formatting issues and so on and so forth. And so anyway, so those are the, but it's better than everybody else's, so it's got a lot of flexibility, but it still has a little bit of ways to go. Go ahead, John.
I was going to say, I mean, they take accessibility very strongly. And so if you look at Zoomtopia, you could see how smooth and how easy it is. And if you know some different languages, the keynotes are in multiple languages, and it's been fun to switch between them.
Yeah, it's a slick system. I mean, I think it's actually a better implementation than most of the broadcasts we work on with multi-language, just because the user can just very easily make a selection of what they're listening to.
Hey, John, as the sun comes up behind you, you're going full Tony the Tiger. Just want to let you know.
I'm going to have to move. I've been put in the corner. Like I was a bad kid. I'll switch out. Or
all you do is get on the other side of the table.
Yeah, I guess I could do that.
Yeah,
I hate switching sides midstream.
Next question.
Okay. Alton Christensen of Brooklyn says, the Blackmagic designed Video Assist 3G has a well-known green cast. Is there a LUT out there that can take care of this green cast issue?
I haven't seen a LUT specifically to do it. The easiest way that I would say if you wanted to build a LUT that way would be to take some footage into Resolve and build a cube, put it on your camera. So if to get it to look the way you want it to look, you got to be careful of doing that because you're now going to start correcting to something that has been a LUT. You just don't want to. I guess when I look at the assist, I don't really care what color it is. I'm looking at whether I got video or not. So I don't care about the cast of the thing. Usually in a production that I work on, I usually have one monitor that we've decided is accurate. And we don't want everyone looking at every monitor trying to make them accurate because that creates a whole bunch of arguments and people making mistakes. And so I wouldn't build that LUT. I'm saying you could do it in Resolve and then put it back on the camera so that it looks right for you there. But especially if you're shooting in log, I guess my thing is Who cares? It's a display monitor. I mean, you want to send it out to a color accurate monitor and take a look at it and make a decision about it, but you're going to do a lot of that work later. The biggest thing is making sure that your exposures are correct and that you're in gamut. I mean, the exact color on set, from my perspective as someone who's going to do the post, I don't really care as long as the exposures are good and I know that I can get to it. So I'm looking for things getting blown out all the time. That's something I worry about every moment. Or things black, black's going, too black. But once I get to that, I'm going to deal with the color later. Go ahead, Stuart.
Hopefully this won't drop out this time. Can you just turn down the green a little bit on the monitor, or is the
I don't think you have that control on the assist
available for it?
I don't think you have that control on the assist. But again, I wouldn't ever use an assist.
That's a shame.
I wouldn't consider an assist ever a color critical monitor. It doesn't cost enough. Next question.
Tony Mobley from the panel in Newman, Georgia says, if you have a very bad audio on a Zoom video, can it be repaired? And if so, how?
What kind of bad audio, I think, is the question.
Okay, so it's kind of it's a minister preaching, and there's static, there's dropouts.
Yeah, if it's really low, or if it's really a low audio, you can sometimes bring it up. Static and dropouts are going to be real surgery. Now there are some software that will handle minor amounts of those, of clicking and a little bit of static. Isotope makes a pretty good series, the RX8 series. Synaptic has some great tools that do those. Those are probably the two that I've used the most as far as cleanup goes, and they'll go through there and fix some of it, but they're expensive, and they're, I mean, not crazy expensive, but $800 to $1,000, I think, for the kits. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, this is a very small church, so
right. That's what I'm saying. It's real surgery. Like, there's no easy way to pull the little clicking or a little bit of this or that or some thumping. There's tools for that are relatively, but if you're talking about static and dropouts, that's like real audio surgery. It's a thing. Go ahead, Courtney.
Are you looking to do this real time, Tony, or are you looking to clean up the audio for posting after the fact and in post?
This is a recording that's already been done. So it's a Zoom service, and actually what I'm trying to do is to put together several different clips of several different ministers for a celebration, a church celebration at the end of the month.
That's great. Yeah, I would the clicking, you'd have to post it, maybe post them on Discord, have people look at it so we can take a look at what it actually looks like. But I think that correcting could be a lot of time, and I don't know if you'd really get it's a good argument for why you want to try to, we spend an enormous amount of time on our audio for Zoom, of really making sure that the mics are good and that we hear a clean signal and everything else, because we know how hard it is to fix it later. It's something that we're very obsessive with because of that issue. Go ahead, Victor.
So Tony, I won't make any promises, but if you post it on Discord somewhere, I can run it through RX and I can let you know what we can fix and what we can't.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next question.
Tim Corbin out of Baltimore says, best webcam talk gear comes up a lot, but given the Logitech choices are hard to come by right now, what recommendations are there for contributor kits?
I mean, outside of Logitech, I would probably lean towards the Huddle Cam, and then maybe the Video 360. We bought about 15 of those for a couple things, and we found that they had a green cast to them that we weren't. John, are you using one right now? Are you using a Video 360?
Yes, I am.
You see that green cast on John?
Yes, I do.
We see that all the time.
But you're out of the witness protection program.
Oh no,
so you're much
it's
better.
not usually that bad. That's not the alien look, but there is a green cast to the Huddle Cams that we see often that drives us a little crazy.
Always looks a little slightly seasick.
Like when they're left to their own devices, they like if you don't have because you have a manual control over it, right, John?
That's what I'm doing, manual control.
Yeah. So if you have manual control, you can pull some of that color back. You can still see a little bit of a green cast in the background, but if you have if we have a good light that's 56K, it will actually usually correct pretty well. So the Video 360 is probably the next one other than the Huddle Cam. The Huddle Cam's $299. Video 360 is like $80. But we're still like our best experience as far as size, cost, quality is all Logitech right now.
If you put a white sheet up and white balances, it
still looks green.
A little bit better.
little bit better. Still looks green.
Son, could you change your temperature just slightly?
Exactly. Next question. We're running out of time.
Gel the sun, no problem. Hugo Antunes from Colombia says, any thoughts on the Nvidia Maxine, and then has a link to it.
I don't have any thoughts about that right now. Like I haven't had time to really dig into it. Let's think about that. Let's maybe post it. We just don't. I'll see if I can find some more information, and we'll come back to that because it is interesting what they're doing, but haven't looked at it enough to talk to it. Next question.
Tim Erskine in Cupertino says, what hardware is used for a Dante intercom system?
So there are some Dante. A lot of intercom systems might use Dante as their protocol. I don't know of a Dante only intercom system. And Sky, you want to mute? I think so we use it in the backbone for ClearCom has it. You can also use Dante in the kind of how you're managing channels inside of Unity comms. There's one out of Czechoslovakia that's Dante only. Also Studio Technologies. So probably the one that leans on Dante the most as just Dante is the backbone is Studio Technologies. So Studio Technologies out of Wisconsin they have belt packs, they have mic controls, they even have a core that'll kind of manage it all. And that's purely Dante. And what's really nice about it is that you can, if you have a Dante network, you can like bring those for talkback into your mixer, or you can even manage all the comms in your mixer if you want to. That's super dangerous if you're actually running your show into it. We've never had a problem with it, but we worry about it. It's what we refer to as fissionable material, which putting your comms in your in the same, just in other buses on the same mixer as your show. You just got to make sure everyone's going to be talking publicly forward. Like they can't be a lot of swearing. If you're going to do that, you just want to make sure that it could go out because you now have faders that are in the same place. So, but we have definitely done that. So in smaller kits that we've done, we've got 4 or 5 Studio Tech 4 channels that go into an X32. And so some of the buses on the X32 are the comms, and that is completely the simplest way to do a small kit. And it's crystal clear sound. So it's a really amazing way to tie. If you've like 4, 5, 6 people that are all in one place, and you just want to throw a belt for the cost of a belt pack, you're getting your comms network. So that, I think Studio Tech would probably be the one I'd pick there. Next question.
Brent Cougar is in from Minneapolis, Minnesota, says, with well over 100 episodes, there must be certain questions that come up over and over. How do you keep patient on answering, and would you consider a fact?
Go ahead, Bill.
I'll talk to the first part of it. I just consider this, it's one-to-one, really. So when somebody comes in, you can't expect them to have been here before. And yes, we have an archive, and yes, people can research these topics. But I think the attitude that I bring to it is just, these are people looking for answers. And if I have an answer, I want to share it now in real time. So I don't really mind if I'm redoing something.
I'm actually surprised at how little we get, how little repeats we get. Like we get maybe, we answer a couple hundred questions a week. I don't know exactly. I did the math on one week, and it was like 260 some questions that we had answered, and I would say there's probably the repeat questions that are truly repeats is like 4 or 5. Like it's really amazing that we get this wide variety because it's constantly moving. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah. We just had the webcam question, and today that focused on the Greencast and right. John's camera. Yesterday that focused on the remote control of the Brio. Yep. So every question drives in a different direction depending on where we are with the tech and who's here.
And where it is, it's new every single time, or it feels like that every single time. Courtney, did you have your hand up?
I did it, but Jeff kind of covered it. God's
Yeah.
just going to say the panel changes and the panel's knowledge changes, because we'll hear about something one day and then we'll go research it, and then we come back with more knowledge next time.
Yep, absolutely. Victor?
No, I echo what they're saying. It's an evolutionary process. This week I'm interested in Dante because a month ago I didn't know about it.
And I've been in a sprint that's hard to describe for the last 6 months, and it ends, much of the sprint that I have goes into just really busy in after the first week of November. And so what you'll see is, as that drops down, I'm going to be able to focus on a lot of things that are in my head about this. So one of the things I want to do is have a website that has bits and pieces of the known things that we've all agreed on over and over and over again, of like, these are the best cameras, these are great mics, so a website that has that, more video content about things that we're learning. So codify things where it makes sense. And then, but not these are the first things we're thinking about, but these are things that we just know most of us agree on. Go ahead, John.
From the Department of Redundancy Department, as a professor, you get lots of questions and you answer them. And I think as you answer them over and over again, we get better. Be better at it. And it's worth repeating some things. There's some basic ball handling that you talk about in sports, and it lets us talk about that every time. Yeah, and I'd sign on to see which microphone Paul's going to use each day.
That alone.
Constantly chasing after Paul. All right, real quick, speed round. We got 1 minute. Next question.
Vincent Alvarez out of Bellingham. Need a low-cost mic to work on an MS Surface USB, not a headset, maybe $50 to $150-ish for presenting on Zoom.
I would use those little Bumblebee ones, or the Blue Nano, the Blue Yeti Nano. I think is a good solid mic, or an SM58 into a little converter. We'll get you there in that price. An SM58 into an MXL, but you're going to end up with things. What do you got there, Victor? Real quick.
This is the Worker Bee. I think it's $90.
Yep. So it's going to be in front of you. If it's not going to be a headset, it's going to be somewhere there, or it's not going to sound great. Next question.
Tim Corbin in Baltimore. Alex or others, you've mentioned you think the Blackmagic 6K is finicky for use as a webcam. What are those pain points?
Go ahead, Bill. Real
Yeah,
quick.
I would say for me, it was the fact that I was taking something that's designed as a production camera that has tons of controls, tons of settings, tons of menus, and doing it, bringing it down to just being a webcam in front of you or somewhere. And so there's a lot to get right once. Once you get it right once, particularly if you're using with an ATEM Mini or something like that, and you can save those settings, it becomes a much easier thing to deal with.
For a production person, it's a much faster. If I'm sending them out, I worry about them. Webcams, they just kind of do the thing, right? But with a 6K, you need to send it out, and there's ISO settings, and there's there lens settings, and there's color space settings, and there's all kinds of things that need to be kind of paid attention to, that make it a little harder for me to send out to someone. But as far as using it myself, I think that it's great. Mine, I would be using mine right now, except I deployed it. So I have a partner that is using my camera at the moment. Go ahead, John.
No, ditto what Bill said, because we got one and set it up, and out of the box, it looks worse than any webcam I have. And it took about 2.5 hours for us to get everything set properly. But
for the 6K?
For the 6K. So
okay, there you go.
But
yeah.
Our tastes have gotten higher since we've been watching people do it in office hours. So
right. I think one of the things that we were fiddling with is the way it interacts with the ATEM Mini is the thing that makes it tweaky. When you just use it, I find when you just use it straight, the video straight out, it's less finicky. So
yeah, that's what we were doing. That's good to understand, because I thought it should have been easier too.
No, it's just getting that black bars, the top and the bottom, and it goes into a different format, and it's some kind of interaction that it has with the piece there. So I think
on top of that, the other weird thing about it was that you have so many different resolution settings and aperture settings and things that unless you know where you want to go, it's hard to just say, oh, I'm just going to turn it on, it's going to work. It doesn't really do that. you start out in 6K mode, and that may not be what you actually want to shoot in.
Yep. Sky, are you ready over there? All right. I was tap dancing a little bit. While we're go ahead, Sky.
What we are trying to understand if I'm coming through my mix pre.
You sound pretty clear.
1, 2.
Yep.
Okay, then we will put that on. What we do have available is recently Madeleine was interviewed by the Evening Magazine here in Seattle, and Guy and or Jeffrey both have that available to play. It's only about 3 minutes, so I'd like to
do it.
Okay, then we'll do that, and we'll put Madeleine in the chair if that's okay.
That sounds great. Let's go. We'll play it while Madeleine's sitting down.
Copy that.
All right, go ahead, Guy.
Or Jeffrey.
I actually don't have that one.
Oh.
I'm hoping Jeffrey does, but I'm not seeing him in the queue.
Jeffrey, oh no, we have the two people that have it. The two people we may have a little bit of a technical issue here. Jeffrey is missing. He's missing in the window.
I also put it on. Alex, you also have it at one time in Discord.
Did you send it to me in Discord here? Hold on.
Personally, yes. It's a private link on YouTube.
Oh, it says it's unavailable. Oh,
That's
it's private.
It's private for me.
Yeah, it says private.
I
can't see it.
Okay. I will go change the status.
If you need a couple of seconds, we did have two more questions
We'll answer a
come
couple
in.
more questions while you do that, Sky.
Lovely.
Go ahead. What's the next question?
The next question comes from Thomas Jenkins in Clarksville. Is the Apple event office hours video available anywhere else?
No, it was an experiment, and generally, I think for those, because we're so freewheeling, I don't want to. It won't. The chances of us streaming it to YouTube are very low, and or recording it or posting it. So that probably won't happen. Those events will most likely be things that you have to show up for, if you want to, at least for the beginning, while we figure it out. Same way that happened here. Next question.
Roscoe Jones is there and says, "What do you think the term comedy institution?
Oh,
what do you think?
I think this is for.
Oh, okay.
Madeleine. Yeah.
Madeleine, that's the MS. I'm sorry.
No
Okay.
worries. We've got a couple questions there. So let's see here. I'm going to try to.
It just comes up automatically on my computer.
Bill, you're a bit hot.
I'm hot.
Oh, there we go. Jeffrey, do you have the video that Sky posted? Did you? Jeffrey looks blankly. What?
Jeffrey had no mic.
He has no idea what I'm talking about.
No idea. I was just on a business call. So
Okay,
Sky
got it.
posted something?
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay, sorry about that.
All good.
The one time you need me.
Yeah, exactly. We're like, where did he go?
Sky has solved the lip sync issue with the mask.
Yeah, exactly. The mask is the key to the operation.
I am making an executive producer decision that you're not going to see the tape right now.
There we go. Very good.
But if anyone wants to see it, it is on my website, which is madinthekitchen.com, along with all of our videos and all of my media appearances. Hi, you guys.
How are you doing, Madeleine?
I'm doing great. It's a little early for me, but Sky has power over me, and I do things for him I wouldn't do for anybody. But listening to you talk is reminding me of how over my 3 decades in television, mostly in late night television, that I was securely placed in the creative department. And whenever I would walk into the control room, I would think they were speaking another language. And so that's how I feel. I'm really impressed. I'm so glad you guys know all this stuff. And I'm here to fill those channels of communication.
Oh, that's
so what I wanted to do just really quickly to sort of set up who I am, which the tape was going to do.
Yeah.
But now I'm going to have another sip of coffee and do it myself.
Sounds good. It's all I was going to ask you to do. And by the way, as people are as we begin this with Madeleine, if you have questions specifically for her as she starts to talk, go ahead and throw them into Makana, vote those questions up, and then we'll post them for. I'll ask Madeleine those questions. So go ahead, Madeleine. Tell us a little bit about your.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about me.
Yeah.
You see some of the statue, which friggin' side it. Anyway,
Yep,
that is an
it.
Emmy and 2 Peabodys. I'm Madeleine Smithberg, and my sort of probably biggest claim to fame is that I was the co-creator of The Daily Show. I was, as I used to call it, patient zero. I was recruited by Comedy Central to create a daily show for them, a job that I turned down probably 10 times before I relented to Doug Herzog, who was my boss, and decided to take, and ran it for its first 7 years as executive producer and showrunner. And I personally was responsible for bringing Stephen Colbert, Steve Carell, Ed Helms, Mo Rocca, Louis Black, Beth Littleford, and one could arguably say Jon Stewart, because John and I had worked together on the precursor, which was the Jon Stewart Show, which started on MTV and then had a slow, painful death in syndication, but was just one of those like place and time things where everybody on it was brilliant, went on to greatness. And I had my own production company. I did a show for Current TV called Infomania that I created. I did a late night show for BET. I sold pilots to every network, and, you know, sort of being that person defined me. Well, it doesn't define me anymore because my life has gone through seismic changes in the past 3 years. I moved to Seattle, where I am right now, or Bellevue, Washington, to be more precise, the future home of the next Amazon headquarters. We just sat here while everybody duked it out, and they came to me. So that's kind of cool for my property values. But anyway, I moved to Seattle because I rekindled a romance with a man who broke my heart in New York City in 1986. And actually, the very second that I got the job at Letterman, I worked for David Letterman for 6 years, and that was my graduate school on NBC Late Night with David Letterman. I produced all the human interest and cooking demos, but this man, Sam Packard, dumped me unceremoniously over the phone and then found me on Facebook. And 34 years later, we just got married. So I moved to Seattle 3 years ago, really knowing that I did not have it in me anymore to push rocks up a hill to get television shows on the air. It's the most horrible process, and it's populated by idiots who are scared of losing their jobs and don't want to spend money because the money's gone because somebody in 2008, somebody dropped a bowling ball in the industry, and the advent of the internet, the writer's strike, so what I say is it landed on the entertainment industry and shattered it into millions of tiny pieces like a jellyfish that are all still alive. And so now instead of pitching to 4 places, you have to pitch to 30, and the money divides equally. Anyway, I was really disheartened, but I moved to Seattle and did not know really what I was going to do. My 60th birthday was approaching, and at the beginning of March, let's go 2 years earlier. I don't know what I'm going to do. I moved to Seattle. I take a cooking class that Sam, my husband, then fiance, gives me for Christmas. I get recruited to be a teaching chef at a place called Blue Ribbon Cooking in Seattle. I've been obsessed with food since I was 12 years old, and my parents took me to France. I ate something that caused, if it were a movie, opera music to come out of my head. And from that moment on, I've woken up every morning of my life deciding what I'm going to cook.
What was that thing that you ate?
It was called Kai, which means quail au raisin. It's quail with grapes and brandy. I was 12, but the alcohol cooks off. So it really was. It's a little bird with like a savory sweet thing. And I just thought in my 12-year-old mind, wait, you can do that with food? Food can do that to you? I'm in. And so I was always cooking. I was completely self-taught until I take this knife skills class. And immediately the guy teaching it says, I run a cooking school in Seattle. You're great. You have a great personality. We can train you. So they threw me in. And I went from the top of one industry to the bottom of another one, a much more physically dangerous one, I might add. But we were running corporate team building events for all the Seattle tech companies. And, you know, it was every day was Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook just coming through, and we would do teams, and you'd have to win, and you're competing against the other chefs. And for the first 6 months, I was just getting burnt. I almost lost a toenail. I cut myself really badly. Excuse me. I might need a water. And then all of a sudden I started winning. And everyone that I was working with were culinary school trained chefs or people that had their own catering companies who had come up on the line in restaurants. They all had a minimum of 15 years experience in professional cooking. And suddenly me, who they sort of really insultingly called a home cook, starts winning. And I realized, oh, I really do have great instincts. Sam proposed on Memorial Day of last year. And at my birthday, when I turned 61 this year, I actually took a moment to look at myself from above and said, look at you, Madeleine Smithberg. You're over 60 and you have just pivoted. You're marrying the love of your life. Who gets that? We were planning a giant wedding on the beach in Mexico. I had rhinestone flip-flops, all the, my producer. So I had this like timeline of when the champagne was coming, when the tequila was coming, what songs were going to be played. Our wedding was supposed to be March 21st.
Right.
On March 1st, Blue Ribbon closed.
Right.
So there went my pivot. And on March 14th, my wedding got canceled, and we went in front of a judge in Bellevue in an empty courtroom in our casual clothes. And then the next day, the courtroom's closed. So we literally got married on the last day you could have gotten married. And that would have changed everything. So now the pandemic hits. We're in quarantine. Not recommended for a honeymoon. I mean, it's just like, instead of I love you, I was like, how many pairs of socks do you have? And why are they all in the living room? And I was done. I lay on the couch in sweatpants and just stayed there for a month. And then one day, I don't really know why, in my sweats with, like, if you look at my first episode, I didn't even brush my hair. I picked up my phone and sort of did sign language because the English language was leaving me quickly from underuse. And I went in the kitchen and I handed the phone to Sam, my husband, and I said, I'm going to make some pasta and you're going to shoot it and I'm going to put it on YouTube. And that's what we did. And then it just sort of took on a life of its own. And the second episode, I did it with a tiny tripod, and the whole episode was my stomach, so I never aired it. I'm not really good technologically, but I was trying, and I was learning to use iMovie to edit, and I was pulling my hair out, and then out of the blue, I get this call from Sky Gleason, and I say that Sky fell out of the sky. I had met him because I was interviewed for a documentary he was working on Graham Kerr, the Galloping Gourmet, who I had booked on Letterman. And so I went to do the interview, and apparently Sky decided, just without telling me, he told me later, but initially, she's going to be my mentor. And I'm like, okay. So he calls me up after my second episode, not the stomach one. That was actually the third episode, if we're going to be, and someday I'll pull it out of the vault, but it's really hilarious. It's just all my stomach talking about lamb chops. So then Sky calls and says, I want to edit your videos. And I say, excuse me, I think my ears are clogged. Did you just say you want to edit my videos and you're an editor? And he said, yes. And then it began. suddenly we had graphics and special effects and the use of music and title cards, and it started slowly like a little snowball, and then it like took off and got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then he said, can I come when you shoot the videos? And that was just sort of like me and Sam's thing. And so at first I wouldn't let him, and then he came anyway. And he brought extra cameras, and then he talked to you guys, and he bought a switcher, and then some lights arrived, and then this Madonna mic thing. Like, I never can figure out this thing where I could either be a Time Life operator, but I like to think I'm Madonna or Beyonce. And you don't judge me. So Sky shows up, and the episodes get better and better and better. And then we go on location, and we shoot at his house, and it's on a lake. And I yell at the geese, go back to Canada. If we can't go there, you can't be here. And I think it was my best joke ever, because animals are always funny to work with comedically. And then we started doing TV shows. I started getting booked. First, it was AM Northwest. And I've done that 3 times with Helen Raptis. And it's great. I cook, I talk, I tell stories. Everybody wants to hear stories about Letterman, which is interesting to me because you would think they want to hear Daily Show, but they don't. They want to hear about the monkey in the dress and Kmart the magician burning Dave's head and border collies herding sheep, all the things of my career at Letterman. They want to hear about Julia Child.
Here's the thing that I think is interesting is this whole idea that you are that I don't think it's unusual for someone to come out of the entertainment industry and compete with in culinary, like to make it more interesting and make it more like, if you look at Alton Brown, if you look at, like he basically was looking at he liked cooking, and he looked at all this cooking stuff and he said, this is really boring to watch. And then he went and learned it and then came back and showed people how to do his show, and but if you look at Alton Brown, it's a real show. Like it's a show that he does, that is cut. Most of it shot single camera. He's not even doing multi-camera. Like he's doing single camera scripted, everything is planned down to the last shot. And it goes through. And then other people like Ken Forkish, I don't know if you're familiar with Ken Forkish, but he wrote Flour, Water, Salt, Yeast, which is my Bible for bread, other than the modernist cuisine Bible, true Bibles for bread.
Those are actual Bibles.
yeah. But but Ken Forkish that's what I started with making bread was, and he was just out of Silicon Valley, got tired of it, and now he has a little place in Portland that he makes bread. But I think that it's kind of that beginner's eye, that starts to go into that, that you are not coming from that tradition. And I think you see that a lot here, is that you're not coming from the tradition. You're looking at it with kind of a excitement without the history of the way it should be, it's just,
exactly. I'm breaking all the rules because I don't really know what they are, but I do know how to produce.
Now we've got a couple questions stacking up for you here. I'm gonna Roscoe asks, what do you think of the term comedy institution? Should the Daily Show be held to a higher standard due to its popularity?
I think that's a little unfair. I think comedy institution certainly makes me proud to hear that something that I gave birth to is considered that way. I think the Daily Show doesn't think about itself that way. The Daily Show thinks of what are we going to do tonight and what's happening in the world. And if the outside world has determined it's a comedy institution, I think the truth is that we've always, from day one, held ourselves to a much higher standard than a lot of things on television or in the media in general.
Yeah.
Is that a good answer?
No, absolutely. Courtney asks, is having a writer's room full of comedians difficult to manage and keep on track with all of them competing for airtime?
It's the most fun you will ever have in your life. For me, I think that comedy is great as a team sport, and that funny people make each other funnier because of their competitive nature. And I look forward to the day when Matt in the Kitchen, that we're doubling down on the sort of late night comedy cooking thing, we'll have a writer's room and I'll get to play with the funny kids again.
What's the interaction with the writers and you and Jon Stewart? Like when Jon Stewart was doing it, like when you're thinking about the content that he has to deliver, how does that work? They're writing some stuff, he's thinking about other things. Like, how does that work?
John's approach was certainly much different than Craig Kilborn in the Kilborn days. I had a lot more sort of really direct contact with them, but Jon, rightfully so, when he came on, sort of grabbed the editorial controls because of what you just said. It was going to be coming out of his mouth. The way that it worked was because it's a daily show, hence the name that we never could figure out a better one.
Right.
You're always scrambling. So the writers would, sort of get in at 9 a.m., look at what was happening in the world, choose 5 stories, go away and write until 1 p.m. At 1 p.m., they come back with the jokes. At this point, they haven't really been given too much direction, although there was a head writer, and the head writer would sort of beat it out and I go, this is kind of where you want to go on this. So I was above the head writer, but always I'm very collaborative with everybody. And then at 1 o'clock, the jokes would come in and we would go, in the Craig Kilborn days, we would go into the head writer's office, which was Liz Winstead at the time. And the writers would all read their jokes and we would do this weird thing called laughing. But when Jon came in, he abolished that. And basically 4 of us would sit in a quiet room with, pens and circle jokes and then say what we liked. And it was a lot less joyful, but probably more efficient time management wise. Right. And then what would happen is Jon and the head writer would dive in and kind of put it all together with a point of view and send them back for rewrites if needed. And then in the afternoon, they would start working on more long-term things like the Act 3 segments, which were like tape packages. We did God stuff. We did, the Lewis Black segments. We had Out at the Movies, anything that was happening that was going to be sort of a day or 2 days behind. At the same time, I had the field department, which really was my babies. And that's where all the correspondents were. And then so we would have fabulous meetings with Steven and Steve, and the producers would pitch stories and we would brainstorm angles. And then they would go out and shoot, usually 1 or 2 day shoots, and come back. And we had 7 edit bays going all the time where that stuff was happening. And then there were the interviews. So there were kind of 3 shows going on simultaneously. Oh, and then there were comedy bits with the correspondents. So really 4. Mm-hmm. And some of that would be day of reactions. We'd go larger. We'd have a correspondent, and the writers would then 2 writers would work with that correspondent to sort of flesh out what idiotic, misguided, completely wrong point of view position the correspondent was going to take.
Well, and I think it's really fascinating to listen to you talk about that, because I think a lot of people who are in our business that, coming up from the web, they didn't come from TV. They have this thing, like me and my friends will go put together the show and it's going to look just like the Daily Show or just like one of the things. They don't realize the scale, like there's hundreds of people working on the show there, there's, and it's, so there's not like it's not like a handful of folks.
Yeah, when we traveled, like if we took the show, we went to LA for a week, during the 2000 election, which was really sort of the pinnacle of my experience there. We were in Philadelphia for a week and then in Los Angeles for the Democratic convention. We had 150 hotel rooms.
Right.
I mean, and then we were still picking up kind of
local
stringers that were local PAs and things like that, and extra camera people. But we really had a core team. So, and I, as the showrunner, really was involved in all of those different departments, except, of course, the technical stuff where I was a disaster. I still call it Chiron.
Right. It's still kind of Chiron.
I remember editing at Letterman, editing some tape on 2-inch reel-to-reel with a guy from, IATSE or NABIT, smoking inside, moving around the giant, and in the Daily Show at the beginning, we had our tape op. We called him the octopus because he had like 10 machines and he was doing this. And then, one day he's just sort of clicking. It's sort of all
the evolution just happened.
It doesn't happen.
A. Mitchells asks, Madeleine, what is Craig Kilborn like to work with?
Okay, for me, I know this is going to come as a surprise. I love Craig. I had a fantastic time. I had a much better life during the Kilborn years because he was a jerk and you knew it. He told you. And he really just wanted to read his jokes and then stare at himself in a mirror for the rest of the day. And he would like want to see if his hand makeup matched his face makeup. And when the first war in Iraq broke out, and this is pre-John, we had Brian Unger on the roof, responding, saying there were air raids, which then would turn out to be a car alarm. But we put him in the night vision. And Craig was like, I'm so bored with the front page stuff. And it was just like, you're wild. But I loved... He and I had a great relationship, and his 5 questions I invented for him, and we had a lot of fun. Even just the other day, I was putting my shoes on, and one of my favorite questions I came up with for 5 questions was sock, sock, shoe, shoe, sock, shoe, sock, shoe, ? And I think I've recently changed to sock, shoe, which I've always been a sock, shoe, shoe person. So that was kind of stunning. Craig and I are still friends on Instagram. He's launched a new thing, but he's terrible. I mean, he's not, he just was what he was, and he worked because he was the Ted Baxter of the original Daily Show. And the original Daily Show really does not get the credit that it deserves because I think John has done a little bit of the the incredible something of the spotless mind where you just erase the past.
I think, but most of us, for whatever reason, most of us, I barely remember the Daily Show before Jon Stewart, like, because it just wasn't. It hadn't become like it hadn't become a thing. Like,
no, and it didn't become it became a thing after the 2000 election. Yeah. That was really the turning point. And it was during those 34 days where we didn't have a president, and then our friends at the Supreme Court elected George Bush. Right. We were the only media outlet that made sense because we dealt in absurdity. And everyone started just looking at us, and we became the story. And that was when it really sort of launched us to the next level of awareness, and then just took off like gangbusters from that point on.
Now, Roscoe asks also, why did you continue to turn down starting producing the Daily Show after so many requests? How do you pick which projects you work on?
Okay, well, I mean, this is a little personal here, but I had spent like 2.5 years in fertility treatments. I wanted to have a baby. I waited too long. I finally adopted my beautiful, amazing son, Harrison, at 2 days old. And I had been in strip in one way or another for I was on Letterman. I did the Jon Stewart show. So I had done like 11 years in daily strip television, and I just wanted more balance in my life.
Can you define daily strip television? Like what that means?
It's a show that's on, every day.
Right.
4 or 5 nights a week. That's produced day and date. So Letterman's 5 days a week. Although Fridays we didn't do shows for a long time. And then we did look, there's me and Dave. That's the Husky Idler. And then the Jon Stewart show, we did 4 shows a week, and then when we got syndicated, we did 5. Right. And so strip means it's a show that does 4 or 5 shows a week, day and date, live to tape.
And you're doing, when you do live to tape, how much, because you're shooting it in the late afternoon, right? It's kind of
5:30, 6. I usually did no editing. I mean, I'd like to bring things in clean, and I really think of the show as live. People do a lot more editing now just because the market has gotten, really, really competitive. The only thing I would do is if like a graphic fired wrong, or if just something egregiously, we cut to the wrong camera. I'd fix the camera shot, but it wasn't like we were shooting fat, which means overtime, and cutting. It was really just polishing. And we never went long. I would be on the floor in my head, on my headset to the AD, the assistant director in the booth, and I would be making cuts on the fly. So if something went over, I would go, okay, pull it out of the interview. And just, I call myself like, air traffic control, because I would always bring it in,
right.
To time.
I was sitting in ABC News doing, and there's two people there that all they did was talk about how heavy or light they were. Like that was the only, their entire world was just heavier light, heavier light, heavier light.
Yeah. At that point, I wasn't really looking for, is it funny? Is it good? I was looking for, is it too long?
Right. Absolutely. Rajan asks, he said, I just visited Julia Child's childhood home. What was it like working with the legend?
It was a hug. There's nobody in the world like Julia. And I was lucky enough to become her friend. And we kept in touch after I left Letterman. And I sent her a birthday card for her 80th birthday. And she sent me a thank you note for the birthday card. True original, larger than life. The voice is the voice. It is what it is. She's a pro, and if you say the words Julia and child to me, my entire body erupts in a smile.
Yeah, great.
I have a funny story about her. Do we have time?
Yeah, we have time.
Okay,
funny stories. Yeah, absolutely.
Julia came on, and she just had re-released the Art of French Cooking, and she was on a publicity blitz. She had been on, Good Morning America that morning, and a bunch of, just any show, and talking, selling her book. And she got to us at, she would come at 2, we would set up the segment backstage. And that's where I, as booking all the chefs and producing them, got private cooking lessons from, you name them in the culinary world. I got to spend this backstage time setting up what we call the demo, cooking demonstration. And it was pretty amazing. And that was my culinary school. So take that, call me a home chef all you want, a home cook all you want. But Julia shows up, and then she's clearly very tired. So we do our setup, and then she does her rehearsal. Dave would not rehearse with the guests. I would stand in just to really show the director, Hal Gurney, what was going to happen and how he needed to cover whatever it was. And it was brief, like maybe 20 minutes. And then Julia's now got some time, but she's mic'd up. And in those days, the lavalier mic packs were the size of, a giant Oxford English dictionary. I mean, they were so gigantic. It's hilarious now to see what I'm, coming through, or what I use with Sky is little tiny, cute little transmitter. But so Julia goes into the green room, which is it's not the Letterman green room at 30 Rock was not a glam place. It was like benches around the outside that were maybe 1.5 feet deep. So we look at Julia, and she's asleep, but her whole body is straight, and she's 6'3",
Mm-hmm.
and she's kind of like leaning against the wall, and she's sort of on the seat, but not really, and she's snoring. And we have to wake her up when it's time to do the show, and she just pops up and turns on the Julia, does the segment. It's amazing, and everybody's happy, and they leave. The next day, the publicist from Knopf, which was the publisher of the book, messengers me a package. And I'm like, what is this? And I open it up, and it's the lav.
She forgot it.
And the note says, we found this on Julia at Le Cirque. So basically, she goes out to dinner, and someone hugs her and is like, what is this thing? And it was the Letterman Lav transmitter, receiver, whatever you call it. Anyway, I loved that because it's just so Julia. We found this at Julia we found this on Julia at Le Cirque.
Well, and the funny thing is that you can tell someone who's used to having it on all the time, they stop thinking about it. You know, it just disappears like their wallet or whatever. And the one thing that we're always very careful of in shows, you'll always talk, the A1 is always talking to the A2 of like, get that mic back, get the transmitter back, get the transmitter back. Like there's this like over and over and over again, get that transmitter back, because I've gone home 3,000 miles away and figured out that I had a transmitter. You know, like it was in my pocket, and you know, and especially now that they're so small.
But that one was so big. It's
that would be impossible.
It's almost impossible.
Robert Laney asks, how did you discover Stephen Colbert? Was it the GM Goodwrench commercials?
Oh, sorry. I was sent. Well, first of all, during that time, which doesn't exist now, I had free reign. If I liked somebody, I could try them out. I didn't have to get network approval, which is like unheard of. So a very junior agent at William Morris named Mike August, who was known as, we described him as having a free food infrared sensor, because anytime there was free food, he would just show up and like know it was there. But Mike August said, I have someone for you. His name is Stephen Colbert. And so he sent me a tape, and in those days, a tape was a 3/4 inch, and you put it in the machine, and the machine would go like clacka, 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 boink. It was like a contraption, and it was a series of sketches from the Dana Carvey show, which had been on for, you know, it was on 3 weeks and it got canceled. And by the way, I was offered a job on that, but turned it down. I pop it in and I'm watching the sketches, and there's some really, really funny stuff. And one of the sketches was called Waiters Who Are Nauseated by Food. And so Stephen Colbert is the waiter, and he's going to tell the specials to the people at the table, but it's making him like nauseous. So he's like, okay, our special soup tonight is a cream of pea finished with a dollop of sour cream. And it just cracked me up so hard that I called my colleague and I go, when can he start? And I didn't have to, I just brought him in. We sent him out on a piece. He hit it out of the park. All my producers fell in love with him. And it was like this honor to be working with someone of that level of genius, especially improv. And improv performers did so great in the field for us because they're writers on their feet. So essentially, and Steve Carell would often describe the process as playing an improv game with an unsuspecting partner, because the people they were interviewing wouldn't really know what was going on and weren't in on the rules of the game. But so Stephen Colbert comes on, and he's delightful and he's brilliant. And about 6 weeks later, I call back Mike August and I say, this may sound like the stupidest question anyone's ever asked you, but I just have to. Do you have another one like that? And he goes, yeah. Go back to the tape of the sketch you love, The Waiters Who Are Nauseated by Food. His partner, his writing partner and best friend, Steve Carell, is also in the sketch. So now I go back and I go, the other waiter will send him over. And that's how that happened.
That's amazing.
And that clip is on my website at mattinthekitchen.com.
Oh, that's awesome.
Along with some famous Letterman clips like Border Collies Herding Sheep and Kmart Incinerates David Letterman.
And for the panelists, just put the questions into the Q&A. We're trying to keep everybody on the same level. A. Mitchell's said, Madeleine, how do you feel about the transition from your more news satire to comedy news commentary as the show grew from Kilborn to Stewart? How do you feel about how it evolved?
I think it was a fantastic evolution. But if you do look back at the earlier shows, it still was a satire. I mean, that's how, when we came up, there was a group of us we were figuring out what the show was. We didn't know. We had been given no pilot and a year to figure out what we wanted to do. And so I just kept on hiring really smart, funny people and then doing that great collaboration. And so we were trying to, it was like that game of elephant where you go, does it have a trunk? Does it have big weird toes? Does it have a skinny tail? And you arrive at it being an elephant. So we knew that it was based in fact. We knew it was topical. And then more and more people that we would hire would bring different perspectives. And Brian Unger was really the pivotal one. And he had been working for CBS News on a show called Day and Date with Connie Chung. And he was disgusted. He just said, because what happened was, you have to think of the context in which The Daily Show was born. That during that time, like 24-hour news networks were popping up like weeds, like dandelions. There was MSNBC, there was CNBC, there was Fox, there was CNN, and it just like every time you turned around, there was another 24-hour news network. And then back over in broadcast, NBC was having problems with their comedy, and so they put Dateline NBC on 5 nights a week. And I always say that Stone Phillips should get a created by credit, because everyone made it about themselves. There wasn't enough news to go around. We didn't, we still don't need that many, although now I'm not even going to get into that, but it was just like, they made it about themselves, and the story became about them. And so we would watch Dateline and we would study Stone Phillips, like furrowed brow, listening. We once did Brian Unger introduced a story, and we made him have 35 camera turns, each one very dramatic. So we were really, we were studying them. And one day we were in a meeting and we were like getting close to the elephant, but we still thought it might be a hippo. And just, it went around the room, like we all got it at the same time. We said, oh my God, what if we pretend we're them? And so it really was, the more serious and self-important that we acted, the sillier we could be. And that notion of The Daily Show never went away. John took it and then built upon it, and obviously brought in his own sense of it.
I definitely thought what was interesting there is that some of it was serious enough that you took it seriously, and then before you knew it, it was absurd again. Like it was, and I think that was what really drew people in, was that there was some stuff that was serious in a tongue-in-cheek sort of way, but we were
angry,
but rougher.
We were
angry. It was basically like, okay, we're not going to try to be fair. We're just going to pull out the brass knuckles and start pounding into this in a way that nobody else is pounding into, but then we'll give you a breath by being really funny. Having something that just is completely out there. And I think that was that mix must have been really complicated.
It was very complicated, and I always felt like the news had it easy because we had to do their job to set the stories up and anchor them in reality and build our, B-roll and setups and show our sources and tell the story of what was happening. But that was only phase one. They did that and then, go out drinking. We did all of that and then started our real job, which was making it funny and finding the angle and spinning the satire.
Yeah, absolutely. Stuart Fairweather asks, could Madeleine talk about the differences between breaking in to TV and the start of her career and doing it all over again now? Are there many more roadblocks to being an on-air personality? So is it harder?
Okay, first of all, it's amazing. Mm-hmm. It's I have always been the funny in the back of the room person. I never did stand up. People would say, you should do stand up. And I was like, are you kidding me? get up on a stage and hold a mic and look at a bunch of people going, you better make me laugh. So I was always very clearly like, I did interviews for stuff, but I never, ever, ever, ever had the courage or desire to put myself on camera. This happened completely accidentally. And it was just because I was painted into a corner by COVID. And it wouldn't have happened because I never would have done it. I would have just found a million excuses to keep doing what we're doing. And a lot of my friends were like, you should do a show. And the actual name Out in the Kitchen actually came from a girls' weekend in Palm Springs where I cooked a meal and we all talked, and it was just like this. And we had come up with the name Out in the Kitchen at that time, and that was about 5 years ago. But then I was like, yeah, whatever. The difference that I'm finding is it's liberating. It's much easier to sell yourself as a personality than as a producer. It's much less work. And because of the PM Magazine piece that aired, I got a new agent. I've had an agent at William Morris, but it's really hard for an agent to see you go from one area to another. And he's so busy, and it's just like I wasn't feeling any love anymore, although I love him as a friend. He just wasn't really doing anything for me. And this woman kind of popped up on Facebook and said, congratulations, you're an inspiration to us all. And I just wrote back, do you want to represent me? And she side messaged me and said, yes. And so now Sky and I are pitching production companies, and it's a different thing. I'm not selling them, they're selling me. Right. Like, I realized it last night. I was like, I'm having this conversation with a woman that runs a pretty successful production company. And normally I'd be like, do I have a deck? What am I going to do? And I go, no, I'm going to sit back and let her woo me. And it's really fun.
Yeah, that's great. Now, Paul Wallace asked, did Jon Stewart ever consider a return to TV?
I don't know. No I can't really talk to that. There are some rumors of why it would not happen that are more of a personal nature, which I don't feel comfortable talking about, but I'm sure he misses it because he keeps popping out from under Stephen Colbert's desk at the drop of a hat.
He was we did a show with an HBO live stream, and with too many puppies. It was too many stars. They have that, and too many puppies, and it was a lot of fun. I was like, oh, I miss Jon Stewart.
No, he's the greatest. He's absolutely the greatest. And just a natural. And I always said that there's this thing out there, like it's the Platonian ideal of perfection. Mm-hmm. And that Jon Stewart and David Letterman are probably the only people I've known that have this unbelievable ability to find the perfect joke. And you see it happening in real time, and it never ceases to be unbelievably impressive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Paul Wallace asks, if you were creating a fake news show today, how would you do it? Who would host it? How would you differ or improve on The Daily Show?
Well, this is top secret, and even Sky doesn't know about it. But I've been asked to create one, and the only reason I'm even talking to these people is that it's animated.
Oh, there you go.
So it would be using live action animation to do live to tape animation and so therefore I feel like I can go further. I didn't even want to talk to them. Then they were like, well, here's $500 for half an hour. We need your advice. And next thing I know, they're like, we need you. And I'm like, you can't have me. I'm not for sale. But I may help them, and Sky will come with me if it actually does materialize. But I love the idea of doing it as animation, because I think there's so much to be made fun of that you can do visually and take it to extremes. So they always have too many people, like you do on the interviews on cable news. There's always way too many people. And so I want to populate an entire almost pixel screen and put little talking heads in all of them and have them all try to talk at the same time.
Well, it's come a long way. I don't know how they plan to do the animation, but like real-time animation now, you could do like you do some of this with your iPhone at this point. Like it's kind of an amazing.
It's crazy.
Time right
It's
now.
crazy. Yeah, and they're working, cutting edge technology. They're affiliated with some university in Orlando that's supposedly the top of the top of the top, and that's where they would shoot. And they have state of the art equipment. And for me, it's like I just get excited. I mean, I can have a correspondent who's a dog, like you can do anything, and that's sort of like unbelievably funny. And I don't know if any of you guys watched the South Park special of the pandemic. It's just there's a way that you can do satire in animation that is just really fascinating to me. But other than that, I really would have no interest in trying to do it again. I feel like I kind of have done it and it's still there. My cat invented the moment of Zen. She used to watch Charles Kuralt in the morning. Now we leave you with the sound of the osprey mating in the marshlands of the southern whatever. And my cat would just sit and stare at it. And I thought, oh, we should end our show with the most disturbing piece of footage and call it the moment of Zen.
I remember this Charles Kuralt in the Sunday morning. The end of Sunday morning was always that little thing. I remember watching that. It was right before McLaughlin Group. Yep, absolutely.
Not
that I was a childhood geek about talk shows. Anyway, so A. Mitchell's also asked Madeleine, when you and Liz created the show, did you ever think it would actually influence news events, even to the point of having full political rally at a U.S. national mall?
We never would have imagined it. It really was. We were so sheltered in a good way, because if we had known really what we were doing and what was the future was to held, we probably would have been paralyzed with fear. And luckily we were just so, we were doing our show for Comedy Central and that's all we were doing.
Right.
We had no way of knowing that we were onto something amazing.
Rajan asks, what changes have you noticed with storytelling with you moving from network to VOD, to YouTube? Any changes?
Well, they're such different formats that there's really not that big of a comparison, because the thing that I love about doing Matt in the Kitchen is the food gives you a built-in narrative structure. It gives you a beginning, a middle, and an end, which is, truer words were never spent. And I just want everyone to notice that during the course of this conversation, I have quoted both Plato and Aristotle.
I'm very good. A. Mitchell asks, Madeleine, how would you handle the broadcast from home format that is currently being used by The Daily Show as well as Stephen Colbert? What do you love? What would you get rid of? What would you change?
Well, I think that, everybody did what they could, but it does lack. I mean, something about, it's like they added the crowd noise in sports, in soccer, so that to keep up the energy. There's something totally dead about watching someone in their home. Mm-hmm. I think Jimmy Fallon actually did the best job, and that's surprising to me, because I had not really appreciated how much talent he has and just the creativity. I think Colbert is doing the worst job. And then they moved Fallon back into 30 Rock and put the Roots in there, socially distanced, and it just came to life. When they built Stephen a studio, they put it in his office and did a recreation of what it had been at home, and it just feels closed in, and like he's struggling to make it relevant. And although Stephen does a great job, especially on things like the debates where he does live coverage, and that's what I created, because we would go live during like State of the Union and pre-produce everything in the show except for 10 minutes, and then we would just turn it around really, really, really quickly and do it live. So you're welcome. But I think Kimmel's doing okay too, but it's not the same. For that type of show is really a variety show. It's a show the audience makes it. There's a reason. When we started The Daily Show, Liz and I were so like into our own fabulousness that we were like, we don't want an audience. That's going to make it seem, daytime And the network really wanted us to have one, so we did a test about a month after, or 3 weeks after we had launched, on the Sally Jesse Raphael set. We had to use all their sets. And we brought in this audience that probably was her audience because they were old. And I think they had to get home by, the 4 o'clock dinner. And as soon as we put the material in front of the audience, we only made it like 7 minutes into the test, and we both ran up to Doug Herzog and said, "We were so wrong. Let's get an audience."
Interesting.
We had a 1,000 square foot stage. We were in a studio on what's now the Hudson Hotel on 57th Street in New York, and it had been the McNeil Lehrer report.
Oh, interesting.
And I had Robin McNeil's office.
That's great.
But our set was bigger than my apartment, but it was 1,000 square feet, and we managed to cram, like, I think we had 75 in the audience. They were like, they had to all be stacked up on each other's shoulders. No, but it was tight.
Rajan asks, where do you get your inspiration for comedy when you're doing your own show?
It's one of those things. I feel like I just channel it. It comes to me. I don't plan it out. I don't write ahead of time. I just talk to the food, and just it happens. I'm really just a vessel.
Courtney Gooden asks, are you relieved that you are not dealing with the strip comedy news show during this administration, where a tweet can change the whole direction of the show at the last minute?
Okay, I'm split on that one, and I'm sure that John feels the same way. In some ways, it's mind-boggling. In other ways, it's just like a fountain of material being, sprayed at you. And there really is such a clear target that it does make me want to grab my tights and cape and get to work. But then I'm happy because I'd be so exhausted. That's just not what I want my life to be anymore. And I made that decision 3 years ago, as you guys know, when I sort of decided to trade my cape for a very sharp knife.
The last question here for today is, where do you get your news these days? It's from Paul Wallace.
Okay, I get it from a variety of sources. I have to say I'm getting too much. My sort of go-to is National Public Radio. I love NPR, and my parents always had it on. It was just the soundtrack of my life. So I always listen to Morning Edition and try to listen to All Things Considered, but at the same time, I also get my news, a little MSNBC, a little CNN, a little New York Times, a little Washington Post. I have like 10 different sources that I check in with on Twitter and Twitter. I sort of like check Twitter and see what's trending, make sure that, we're still standing when I wake up in the morning, make sure there's still a sky above us and an earth below. And then I get on with my day. My husband likes to turn on Fox News every so often just to see what they're saying. And when that happens, I break out in a rash and start convulsing.
The important question about NPR is, do you listen to Weekend Edition?
I love Weekend Edition, and I love the puzzle.
I was going to ask you if you like the puzzle. Are you a fan of the puzzle or not? Because that's the real thing. The difference. It's like sock, shoe. It's, do you like the Sunday? I'm not a big Sunday puzzle fan. I'm always like, okay, I want more protein, but I've talked to a lot of people about Weekend Edition, and there's puzzlers and non-puzzlers.
Oh, I'm firmly a puzzler.
That's very good. All right, hey, Madeleine, thank you so much for coming. We just
you
so
are
appreciate
so welcome. Okay, I just want to say, please go to my website, madinthekitchen.com.
Yeah.
Please, all my videos are there. I need you guys to watch them, like them, and most importantly, subscribe on YouTube.
Okay.
Just so we can keep the empire building, and then I can come back and tell you more about it.
All right. There's 843, so it's our accountability now to go out there, and everyone, we got to move that needle. So everyone go there, subscribe, and
I want
watch,
1,000
watch the
subscribers.
videos.
I want 1,000 subscribers by 2 p.m.
Pressure's on. Go out there and subscribe. All right, go ahead, Stuart.
Thank
real
you
quick.
so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Madeleine. Thank you so much. This is our wave. Yeah, thank you so much for and hopefully we'd love to see behind the scenes of your shoot sometime. Maybe Sky will open up the camera, stream it out, put it in a Zoom, and we can all watch it while you're.
I think that's a fantastic idea. And if anyone's interested, we're doing an experiment this weekend. We're going live. I'm cooking. We're using, I guess, Streamyard, but we're going to be going live with a woman from Denver who I met in a spice forum on Facebook, and I'm going to teach her how to make penne alla arrabbiata in real time, and we're sending out the recipe, and I'm soft launching it, but I really think live streaming has huge potential. Oh, yeah. And Sky is helping me to play with said potential. So that's Saturday at 5 o'clock Pacific. Do the math if you don't live in the West Coast.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks, Madeleine.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Thanks for all the content, Madeleine. It's been fabulous, your shows.
Oh, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
And thanks everybody for joining us once again. Yet another one, and with such a great guest. Tomorrow we'll be talking about how do you get into this business? How do you get your first jobs, and how do you keep those jobs and keep your clients as a single individual, not so much as a company like we talked about earlier this week. And then of course Saturday we'll have education. So